All right, so we'll start Life, the Universe, and Hot Dogs. And tonight is Puppies, Pluses and Pitfalls of Operant Conditioning. And I have special guest Nikki Puccini of Aleron Dog Sports in Youngstown, Ohio. Hi, Nikki. Are you muted again? You have to stay unmuted.
Okay, am I unmuted?
Yes, don't mess with me. Okay, welcome, Nikki. And here is Nikki with an apparently unconditioned looking dog there. All right, so what is there to know about these things? What is operant conditioning? Well, there are two kinds of conditioned response. There's classical conditioning, which is also called Pavlovian conditioning. And Wikipedia tells us that this is a learning procedure in which a biologically potent stimulus, such as food, is paired with a previously neutral stimulus, like a bell. It also refers to the learning process that results from this pairing of the stimulus with the neutral stimulus. So the neutral stimulus comes to elicit a response that's usually similar to the one elicited by the potent stimulus. So I'm just gonna play, we promised you there would be puppies. Here's some puppies. We'll play a video of them. These are the current litter of Pyrenean Shepherds, the bred litter. They're 3 weeks old, and yesterday, when it wasn't as rainy as today, I put them outside for the first time. They can look around. And so if you think about them, they're out in the yard, they're in their swimming pool. I know some of you will say, why are those puppies in a swimming pool, a wading pool? It's because it's a very easy way to keep puppies and their mother together without having any corners of the whelping box that they could get caught in and things like that. And it's also easy because you can just take them right outside and they have their house with them. But you can see them twitching their ears a lot. This environment is in many ways neutral for them, but they're noticing everything. At 3 weeks, they've just gotten through the stage where their eyes aren't open, their ears aren't open, and they're very focused on just sleeping and eating and their mother. And at 3 weeks, they sort of open their eyes to their surroundings and they start interacting with it. And it's not clear to them exactly how to sort it out. So I have a little video that I made yesterday that I'll play for you, and then we will talk about the other kind. So this is an example of classical Pavlovian conditioning.
They've become much more alert to the world and are taking things in now. And so this is the stage that we find them. And you might think, okay, well, what kind of conditioning could you do right now? You're not going to train them to sit or anything like this. Well, I have here some yogurt. And one thing that you can do is to put the yogurt in front of the puppy. This is the first time that these puppies have had yogurt, but they seem to know just what to do with it. Yeah, good stuff. They do this. They lick it off each other's faces. Yeah, very tasty. And so, okay, so you'd say, well, how is this dog training? You're going to feed the dog some yogurt, right? Right? But the thing is, you think of the world as being dominated for dogs by scent. They certainly see well, but for them, it's scent and touch, right? What they touch with their nose and their tongue and their mouth, right? And so for dogs that have such excellent olfaction, what are they experiencing when I give them the yogurt? They're not just smelling and tasting the yogurt, they're smelling and tasting my hand, and they're hearing my voice. And so they're associating my smell of people and of me in particular, with the yogurt, which they really like, right? And so we're imprinting them on humans. They're already very much inclined to like humans, but now we're giving them an extra reason, and one that's very direct into their world, as to why humans are really fun and it's really good to trust them. Getting very excited, looking for where that yogurt went.
All right, so that's classical Pavlovian conditioning. They like the yogurt, they smell the scent, they associate the scent with stuff that they like. All right, so on the other hand, there's this operant conditioning that we said we were going to talk about, which is also called instrumental conditioning. And this, Wikipedia also tells us, is a type of associative learning process through which the strength of a behavior is modified by positive or negative reinforcement. It's also the procedure that's used to bring about such learning, and that's what Nikki is going to talk to us about here. So Nikki, if you want to take it away here, I will start playing this video of your dog Savvy.
All right. So this is the steps to teaching a handstand, which is something that a lot of people, when I show this trick with Savvy, they think it's a very odd trick and can't imagine how you might teach a dog to do it. But it's actually really easy when you break it into small steps that you reward just a little part of the behavior at a time. So here, Savvy is learning to put his back feet on a cushion, so it's just a couple inches off the ground. And once he gets good at that, I teach him to back up onto it. And you just built a lot of reinforcement history for doing this behavior super easy. Like puppies of almost any age can learn to do this. So then you'll gradually start to make it a little bit more difficult as they get good at it. And you'll see coming up here, then I'll move to something a little bit taller. So I have a board that's on top of the pillow now. So we're teaching the exact same behavior, but it's a little harder now. And just basically breaking it into tiny little steps that the dog can easily be successful with. And for a trick like this, you have to do this because it requires a certain amount of conditioning, muscle tone and all that for them to even be able to do it. So this kind of naturally gives you that muscle building as the dog is learning to do the trick. So now it's starting to look a little bit more like a handstand with the dog going backwards up the ramp.
Yes.
This is not the sort of thing that people generally think about when they think about dog training. You can see that these little steps, each one gets conditioned, and then it gets added on and added on and added on. And what Nikki said about there being a conditioning history is super important to this.
When you break it up into small steps like this, the dog gains confidence because they can always be successful. You're not trying to, if you start immediately trying to get the dog to start at this point, very few dogs would be able to be successful at it. So it's looking quite a bit like a handstand now. So from this point, you just keep working on getting straighter and straighter up the wall. And you hear that I'm using the word yes before I give the treat, and that's just a marker that tells the dog what they did to earn the treat.
Sometimes people use a clicker as a marker.
I lose them, so I just use the word yes.
Okay.
Now it's looking quite a bit like a handstand.
Getting much closer now. So this in real time would take many weeks to get to this point. So it's not something that you can expect to get immediately. So and there we have the handstand behavior with the board just flat against the cupboard. And then the handstand with no prop.
Upsie.
The question is, has come in, what are you using as a prop?
What I'm using is the same prop that I used to teach the fly ball box turn, which is a piece of wood with rubber matting on it, like a large square of wood.
Great. All right. And so, all right, let me oops. Let me just, okay, this is, there we go. So now we'll look at this next one, which is very interesting because you've shown how to use food, how to condition with food, how to use the food as a reward for training the handstand. And now we're going to see how to use food to get a dog refuse to take food.
So you start with, I have
it's
treats in my hand, and the dog obviously really wants the treats, but anytime she tries to get the treats, I'm not allowing her to have them. So when she backs off, I open my hand so she can look at the treat, but she still can't have it if she's trying to get it. So she learns
And she offers other behaviors.
Yes, she starts offering other behaviors. How can I earn this treat? So the first reward,
I know
of
what
this
it is. I don't know how to put it
to look at it. If she's staying off of it, she can look at it, and if she stays off of it longer, then she gets fed a piece. And the interesting thing about this is that the more the dog wants the treat, the quicker they'll learn this behavior. I often, when I taught group classes, people would be like, my dog will never learn to do that. And I could get the dog doing it within about 5 minutes. So then here's a progression of that, where she's able to stay off of it in my open hand lower to her face. And a lot of times dogs will offer to back up, lay down, or sit for this. And I'm not real picky about what they do as long as they're not trying to get the food. So you can see she's already in this video a lot farther along, but it's not actually a long period of time that's passed. I think that this was probably the next night.
Yeah. Yes.
So she's starting to understand here, what I want is that I don't want her trying to get the food. And then you'll see that she'll start almost trying to go off her way to show me how much she's not trying to get the food. Now the food's on the floor, it makes it a lot harder because she's used to being able to, eat treats off of the floor if she finds them. But she still has to not take them.
Doesn't make any sense.
Very tricky.
The dog to live.
Dawn, you did very well. One more. Good girl.
So you see, she almost just like, look how much I'm not trying to get that treat.
And so here you're starting to introduce movement, which is also one of those triggers that would really get the dog to want to do it.
Yes, exactly. Just build it up a little bit at a time, just like the handstand. Make it a little harder every time.
And at this point, you told her off. You've put a name on what she's supposed to be doing at this point.
Exactly. And I do wait until they are pretty reliably offering the behavior I want before I add a name to it. Otherwise, they can get a little stuck on wherever you named it.
And here you're tossing them where the visual motion, even if it wasn't food, they would already be interested in going after it.
Yeah, exactly. This is it gets much harder when you start throwing the treats.
But she has the concept.
Yes.
Okay, so let's see. There we go. All right, so here's the younger puppy. And she's going to learn, this is, okay, this is the chin rest one.
Yes.
Okay. So this is more abstract in a way because there's a particular behavior you're looking for.
Yes.
So what I'm rewarding here is anything towards putting her chin down, which is just a cute trick, but it is it's a little different. Like Patricia says, it doesn't matter what she's doing in the bed as long as she's putting her head down. That's what she's getting rewarded for.
She's trying to remember what she did a minute before. Yeah. Wait, what did I do?
Yes.
And this is just the course of one session. This is a totally new behavior for this dog.
Yes.
So you can see she catches on pretty quick to the idea of what's going on.
Yes.
It's always fun with this sort of training to see when they understand, when you can see the little light bulb go off and they're like, oh, I think I'm doing something to get these treats.
Yes.
What age do you start doing this?
Tricks like this, I'll start with puppies at any age. As young as 8 weeks, they can learn things like this. The more difficult physical tricks, I wait until they are physically able to do them, which varies depending on the individual. So like handstands, I wouldn't start with a young puppy because they're just not physically able to do them. But any tricks like that involve, you know, simple things like this, any age puppy can learn them. And it's good for puppies as young as possible to start learning all kinds of things because it sets them up to kind of know how to learn.
Yeah, to my mind, they construct a template for learning between about 7 weeks and 12 weeks of age. And if you've taught them to do something, anything, doesn't matter what it is, they lay down that template for learning and they keep that for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, let's go on to the next one. I mean, it makes dogs, they're so much more logical than people are in so many ways. You know, they follow, it's almost like you're putting a computer input and they give back the answer, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So
and it's teaching them to use a language, basically. They understand that this is, this means this, or, you know, they understand yes means that they've done something to earn a reward. With the food refusal, they understand that when you cover the food or you close your hand, it means it's not available to them anymore. And it's kind of like you can start then using that to teach them not to bolt out of crate doors or front doors. They just kind of can translate that to other things once they have a good understanding of it.
Good. All right, let's do the skateboard. Now here, Speckles is learning to do the skateboard.
So I'm starting off rewarding any interaction with the skateboard. And for something like this, you want to always be sure the dog isn't afraid of the thing, because something that moves or makes noise, dogs can always be a little bit hesitant about. She is not. So once we get the behavior of putting feet on the board and being confident about it, I start trying to reward her moving the board. And then the reward placement here also helps with furthering that along. So she's getting the reward while the thing is moving.
Job.
And that kind of just reinforces that, you know, she needs to keep her feet on the board and push it for the treat.
Great. Are there any questions at this point? If you have a question, just unmute your volume and ask the question. There's also a chat feature where if you want to type your question in, you can do that too. All right, hearing none. This is a little bit different because it's a little freeform, but it also requires a specific behavior and balance.
Yes.
So tell us what you're doing here.
So the goal of this is to get her to hug her hippo friend. It's a cute trick. And it does work on their balance quite a bit. So it's a good conditioning trick for things like agility or fly ball. So I'm starting with any feet on the hippo is getting rewarded. And this is, I believe, her first session ever.
Much better, much better.
And then I'll start trying to move toward reinforcing her wrapping her legs, at least one leg around the hippo, so that she could eventually hold onto it herself.
Yes.
And
how long did you spend with this?
This is probably a summary of about a 5-minute training session.
Good.
So these sessions, none of them are very long. Dogs tend to learn better when you do short training sessions more often than trying to do like an hour-long training session with them.
So do we.
Yeah. You can see how she's already starting to get the idea here. She knows that it has to do with holding on to this thing. So with probably just a couple more sessions, she would be able to hold it herself when I let go of it, because we're already getting pretty close to that by the end of this.
Super. All right. Now here's an interesting concept where you're not trying to get the dog to do a specific behavior so much as to have a particular feeling, a particular emotional change about it. Where the dog is afraid of this object and you're going to condition it to be not afraid of the object, which can be a real challenge.
So I had started this session wanting her to just walk over the ladder, but she touched it and it's metal and it made a clanging noise and she was afraid of it. So then I moved to conditioning her to be more confident. The interesting thing about this is it's using both positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. So that's why I'm not rewarding all the time with her in the ladder. She makes a brave move towards interacting with the ladder. I mark the behavior and I reward away from the ladder. That letting her move away from the ladder to get the treat actually helps build confidence because it removes the pressure of interacting with something that she thinks is a little scary. And this is also just a 5-minute session, and you'll see, you know, she's already starting to walk in it now, going from not even being sure she wanted to come near it to walking through several rungs.
Yes.
And I'm still switching between rewarding in the ladder and rewarding away from it. And that actually makes a huge difference when you're working with anything that is dogs being fearful. Letting them have a chance to escape the thing that they think is scary actually is really valuable.
Oh, so much better. Good job. Yes.
And so there, by the end of the 5 minutes, she is trotting happily over the ladder, which was what I thought she would do immediately when we started. So you have to be flexible in your training and take what the dog brings rather than what you think the dog should be doing.
Yes.
Yeah, so we've talked a lot about the pluses of this kind of training, but the pitfalls part, as you just said, you've got to be patient and you have to let part of it be driven by the dog.
Yes, exactly.
And that's very hard for a lot of us to do.
It can be hard, especially if you know, people think they have to have the dog do something right now. And then they tend to, a lot of times, create a bigger problem by trying to push the dog to do something they're not really ready to do.
Yeah, I see a lot of people, when their dog's afraid of something, they immediately focus on the object that the dog is afraid of and start trying to get them to touch it. And the dog's like, oh my God, what, this object must be very dangerous.
Yeah, it's just totally reinforcing the dog's first thought that this was something really sketchy going on.
How old is your dog?
That dog is about a year old in this video.
What kind of dog is it?
She's a Pyrenean Shepherd.
Just curious.
All of the dogs you've seen so far are Pyrenean Shepherds.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. So could you explain again, you talked about how you were rewarding for the dog going away from the thing that it was afraid of.
Yeah, that's actually, it's actually negative reinforcement when you do that. You're taking away something the dog doesn't like or feels pressured by. You're giving them relief from that pressure. And it actually pairs really well in a lot of cases with the positive reinforcement. It almost makes it like a double reward for the dog. So the dog is getting the treat, which they want, but they're also getting relief from pressure of interacting with something they're not sure about. I use this a lot with dogs that are afraid of people. Most people want to just give the strangers treats and have the dog, you know, going up to them for treats, but that's a lot of pressure if the dog is really, really afraid. So I'll reward any movement towards the person and then call the dog back to me to reward them myself, so that they're not having that constant pressure. Because a lot of times what'll happen is the dog will like very timidly take a treat from somebody, and then the next time the dog goes up, the person wants to touch them right away. And then that's just adding more and more pressure and not giving the dog enough relief from it. And I find that they come around a lot quicker if you pair that negative reinforcement for things that they're afraid of, because it's not making them feel overwhelmed.
Yeah, I've even seen people who are concerned their dogs are afraid of people, and they've basically taught the dog to hide behind them and then dart out and touch the person's hand and race back behind them.
Yes,
without
yeah.
realizing they have built that behavior into the dog.
Yes,
Yeah.
Exactly. Or worse is the ones that start, you know, they've had so many people feed the dog, and the dog is still not, their emotions have not changed about interacting with strangers, but people want to touch them when they're close to them. So then they actually end up teaching the dog to bite people because the dog ends up being too close to a stranger and feeling like they have to do something to stop the stranger from touching them. It's sort of like the reason you don't want to feed bears.
Yeah, it can be very challenging for us. They're much more logical than we are. All right, so now here is a series of videos about how you teach the fly ball box. Can you explain what fly ball is for people who are not familiar?
Fly ball is a relay race between two teams of dogs. Each team has 4 dogs and 4 handlers. There's 4 hurdles that go down to a box that is like a giant pedal, and the dog, you'll see it later in this video, the dog hits the front of the box and it triggers a ball to pop out. So then the dog has to take the ball and run back over the 4 hurdles while another dog passes into them. So it's a relay. So once all 4 dogs have gone, it's over, and whatever team's 4 dogs have successfully completed the course properly, so they have to carry their ball over the finish line and all that, then they're the winner of that race. So the most complicated part of fly ball is teaching the box turn. So you want the dog, for safety and for speed, you want the dog to have basically a swimmer's turn off of the box. And this is something that takes a long time to train properly. You start, you'll see in this video, I have that ramp that you saw in the handstand video. I have it just propped up on a towel, so it's really low. And you're going to see the puppy is learning to do it for a toy. So all I'm doing is encouraging her to run up, hit the ramp with all 4 feet, and then come back for her toy. So that's about as much as I would do with a puppy this age. She's about 5 months old. So just getting them in the habit of going and interacting with the ramp all 4 feet. So this is a little bit of an older dog, and you could see we have the ramp raised, and we're rewarding her for hitting it. Sometimes we do things with props, or even I'll use my leg. I'm trying to teach this dog to turn really tightly. So you can notice the reward placement is under my leg. So she's doing a really tight turn and coming back under my leg. So this is a prop that just gets the dog jumping up and hitting higher on the box. We want to encourage high hits. So then once we're off the ramp, we add this board to the box, and you see Perry here is grabbing her ball off of it. Now this is a nearly complete fly ball turn with just props left to encourage the dog to jump up high. And here is the finished product at a tournament. So this is an ideal turn, basically. All 4 feet hit the box, swimmer's turn, nice and high up on the box. So that can take many months to train, and then you kind of have to keep going back at it with a lot of dogs, because once you add things like other dogs, dogs in the other lane, it'll start to get sloppy because the dog has to put a lot of thought into it. So there's a lot in fly ball of going back a few steps, reminding the dog of doing their turn. This is not the behavior that would naturally occur with these dogs. if you have a really ball obsessed dog, you could absolutely get them to do this without training the turn, but they're just going to slam into the box with their front legs and get the ball, which is not only slower, so you don't really want it for sport, but it's a lot less safe for the dog. So the swimmer's turn kind of helps with impact on the joints. And it's a nice fluid motion, and they eventually, once it's trained and the dog is like really seasoned at competing, the dogs retain this for years and years and years. Like even if my dog took like a year off of fly ball and went back and his turn was still good. Like, but it's a kind of ultimate example of breaking a behavior into really, really small steps so that the dog fully understands, is fully confident and conditioned before every step that you move up. So the board in front of the box just helps get that picture to translate. And then we have Velcro on it, so you could stick the ball to it and introduce the ball that way. Because the box actually, it makes a noise and it triggers. So it's some dogs are a little afraid of it. So I like to show it in slow motion once it's done, because it's over so quickly that it's hard to even appreciate the behavior fully.
Cool. All right, so do we have questions or comments that anyone might be thinking about? I think Taryn had something to say. Taryn, can you unmute your?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay. I'm hitting the video. Just a second. I want to show off my puppy. Can I get her in here? Wait, I don't see me.
I see you.
You may have to scroll through.
Can you see my puppy?
Hi, Cheetah.
Can you see her?
Oh, there she is. Yes, I see her.
I'm tossing her treats while we're doing this. I taught her a default down, and so she's doing it for everything now.
Oh, perfect.
Her favorite behavior. This may be off topic, but when Patricia said that, you know, when I seen that it was about puppies, I guess I thought about how when the typical pet owner gets a puppy, the first thing they think about is how they want to fix everything. My puppy bites my hands. My puppy is, you know, biting my feet as I walk or tugging on my pant leg, and my puppy is jumping on me. I think that's actually the wrong focus, is to get your puppy and to just start thinking how we're going to fix this puppy. When, to be honest with you, this is something I mentioned to Patricia. I've never actually worked on having a puppy not bite on my hands. I just know that it's actually something. So I'm like on dog number 20, and then I've done like 20 years of board and train. But you know, I you know, like Zip at 7, almost 8 isn't going around biting on my hand. Just because that's not where I put my focus on. And I think sometimes when we go into it, putting our focus on it, it actually becomes worse. Versus actually just managing the behavior and, you know, working on other things. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I agree. A lot of it is you just want to like kind of build on your dog's strengths and try to downplay the things that you think are weaknesses. So a lot of people kind of do the opposite, and they tend to want to say like, this is what's wrong with this dog and we need to fix this before we do anything else. And that oftentimes backfires and ends up just building the behavior that you don't like. It's just like the dogs are afraid of people, just obsessively trying to get people to feed them and interact with them and show them that it's not scary. And, you know, that just convinces the dog that it actually is scary.
Right.
Yeah, I think oftentimes I've had people who have various different kinds of problems with their puppy or their adult dog, and they're like, "How do I get him to stop doing X, Y, Z?" I said, "Well, you should go take an obedience class or a puppy class." And they're like, "Well, but we don't even cover, ripping the cover off the couch in puppy class," and to try to get their focus off those particular behaviors, like you were talking about with the biting of the hands, and onto something constructive. And I say this problem will magically disappear once you build the relationship up the right way.
Yeah, exactly.
Mostly they just magically go away. Ignoring them and building the relationship. Yeah.
When I started doing flyball, one of the things that I liked the most about it is that like people would bring these very imperfect dogs to our beginner flyball class, and dogs that they had all kinds of complaints about, and we got those dogs running, and over time suddenly their problems were a lot less, just because they had a job now and they were being worked with, and their person I think kind of their focus had moved to, wow, my dog could do this really cool thing, rather than my dog has these behavioral issues.
Yeah. Are there more questions or comments? No? Anything you'd like to add, Nikki?
I don't think so. I think we covered a lot.
We have about 3 minutes left.
3 minutes left.
Yes. If you have anything to sum up, now would be the time.
I would say that if you get a puppy, a lot of times, going off what we were just talking about, just start teaching them tricks. Don't worry so much about if they're obedient or if, they're doing exactly everything you want them to do. Start teaching them tricks, and that will help teach them how to learn, and it'll build a good relationship between you and your puppy in sort of a low stress, low pressure way. Which is what a lot of puppies really need more than they need to learn, stop biting, stop jumping, stop pulling, stop chewing. They need to learn to have a relationship, a working relationship with you.
Terrific. Well, thank you very much, Nikki.